Hello, YouTube. I'm Ellen Melko Moore, and I love pop culture. I love transformation and self-help, and I love the digital marketplace. And so that's what we're going to explore here today. And boy, do we have the perfect book to kind of talk about all of that. And it is a book that is very popular right now, which also controversial, which you may have heard of, which is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. So as you might imagine, this book has got some people upset, but this book has also got some people really, truly excited. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what makes the book work and why you might want to read it. So let's start with, why is this book so popular? Well, obviously, the title does a whole lot for us. I love her posture as she's holding, I believe, her mother's urn. And like the whole cover of it is very good housekeeping. And I think that's very intentional. So we've got this incendiary title, but also we have someone named Jennette McCurdy. And in case you're old like me, and you were not there for the, heyday of the Nickelodeon era, Jennette McCurdy was one of the most popular stars on one of the most popular shows Nickelodeon ever had, which was called iCarly. She plays the leading character, Carly's best friend. And so at her height, she had millions and millions of fans, and this was a show that got watched a lot. And a lot of people modeled themselves or wanted to model themselves on this character, Sam, that she played. Sam was somebody who was, sharp, snarky, loved to eat, and was basically, taking no shit, I think might be a way to sum it up. So when a book like this comes out, a phrase that I heard some other people use in reviewing this book is celebrity memoir. And they were talking about how it's different from other celebrity memoirs. I think this is much more in the category as far as the quality of the writing and the rawness of what's going on and just the, giving no shits realness. Like it's much more like a literary memoir, or what some people would call literary memoir. And that just means sort of those like really hard hitting literary memoirs, like one from a couple of years ago might be Educated, is one that comes to mind. So, but I think the initial appeal and what's actually in this book is what makes it so interesting for so many people who care about this on a number of levels. And I think, again, we've got this top level of the title, this super, super popular person that lots of people know, and the fact that it's a celebrity memoir, i.e., we're going to get the tea, we're going to get the gossip behind the scenes. The other person that Jennette McCurdy worked with was Ariana Grande. They had a later show together, and there's all kinds of fun stuff in there about that. So I think what's so fascinating is just this contrast between initially this sort of very, just the fun stuff, gossip, tea, a person you know well, pop culture, all that good stuff. So but what really, really works about this book is that it's doing both these things at once. It is definitely serving pop culture fun and then something very, very real and a very, very traumatic topic of parental abuse and some very, very serious stuff that's going on. And finally, I don't think I've ever read anything like this as far as I've read quite a few books of people who suffered from various types of parental abuse. Educated is actually a recent one that comes to mind. I think what's so cool about this one is how she comes out on the other side. And she said in a recent interview that she was proud of herself and she thinks she's living her life with integrity now. And I think that's what this book is also an incredible story, that it goes from just the depth of such incredible bullshit and disgusting behavior and control and rules and somebody else controlling your world to a really personal transformation on the other side that seems absolutely 100% real. So, why would you want to read this book? Why should you read this book? Well, the writing is incredible. It's a great book. It's a great story. It's an incredible story. Basically, the summary of this would be, I don't like to give a whole plot summary because I feel like if I'm going to do that, why should you read the book? But basically, Jennette, as a small child, her mother wanted to be an actress or an actor and was not successful in that. So decided when Jennette was very, very, very young that Jennette should be doing this, although it wasn't Jennette's dream in particular. A little bit later on, her mother also introduces her to counting calories and basically morphing into kind of extreme anorexia, and then for Jennette, later bulimia. So, and also Jennette in her mother, and what's sort of around of their family are members of the LDS Church, which, again, not saying anything bad about the LDS Church, but that is another area where there are some very strict expectations and rules. So she's got that going on. She's got her mother, who is basically doing everything she can to keep Jennette tiny so she can be big. This is fascinating. Like, if you look at this woman, look how tiny she is. I think she's in her 30s now. And when she's in interviews, you see her sitting there. She almost she still looks like a very tiny person, almost a teenager. So it's so important to Jennette's mom to control her that she's, not only is she teaching Jennette to be very, very strict about her calories, and, as Jennette starts blossoming into a woman, mom does not like that at all. So then there's also the fact that her mother is doing things like showering her till Jennette is 16. So that seems somewhat problematic. But meantime, it looks like all Jennette's mom's strategies are working out. Jennette finally scores. She's in a few other smaller roles in Hollywood, and then she scores this, giant hit with iCarly, and again becomes one of the most famous teenagers in the world. Of course, at this point, she's also really, really suffering profoundly from an eating disorder. She winds up in some inappropriate relationships. We hear a little bit about the main guy at Nickelodean, referred to as the creator throughout the book, and what he's up to. And if you want to find out who that guy is and what else he's up to, there's quite a bit of information. But if you read this book, you'll figure out who that is. And the other aspect of all of this control, and this high control from these different areas, there's the rules of Hollywood for a child who is now on a job set with adults who does not have much power in this situation at all. Meanwhile, of course, fans around the world would assume she has got it made. There's the parent and what her mother is doing. There's the way her religion mixes in to all of this. And so there's all these high control areas happening in Jennette's life. And then, of course, because she is basically a child, she winds up getting in some adult relationships that she can't control. And so the control of food becomes more and more important to her. And it's fascinating and excruciating at the same time. You just can't stop turning the pages. But what's really cool is when Jennette starts to realize she needs help. And so she does reach out for some psychological help. And, I forgot to mention this. The other aspect that's going on is that her mother, when Jennette, I believe, is 9 or 10, anyway, her mother goes through cancer and apparently is extremely sick, almost dies, manages to make it through that. And then as Jennette is going through this sort of epic rise in fame and just turning into her later teenage years, then Jennette's mother has her has a relapse, or is it called a relapse? Anyway, she gets sick again. And so she's sicker and sicker and sicker, but still trying to control Jennette's life in every possible way. And it's not a spoiler from the cover of the book that her mother does in fact die, and Jennette is looking for help. And so the first help she gets, she's pushing back, she's fighting, just like anyone would, any of us would, whatever the beliefs and ideas and experiences we have about ourselves that really shape our deep behavior, including how we respond to trauma. And, it's so important to Jennette through all of this in her childhood to believe that her mother is good and looking out for her, and she must be right. And the fact that all this is just painful is, her mother just knows better, basically. And look, she's got this incredible career. So obviously that's why this happens. Just because, her mother made her do it. And as she starts to resist this help, we start to see all these little ways that Jennette is starting to wake up. And I think that's really powerful. I think it's a story about somebody going from high control, parental abuse, into their own empowerment and integrity. And I think that's what a lot of people are going to take out of this. I think what's cool about this book is I think people will pick it up for the title, for the tea, and very quickly get sucked into something that might be not just a little bit heavier, but more complex than they were expecting. And come out of this with a truly incredible vision of what is possible. It is breathtaking. And seeing Jennette on interviews, I think really confirms that doing this, and this took so much courage. There is so much that she's revealing about herself as well as her mother and her family. She finds out later that somebody that she believed she was biologically related to isn't actually her biological relation. And, as her young adulthood is, coming on, she's got all these control behaviors around food. And then bulimia, she wants to be a successful anorexic, is I think what she says, but then becomes a maybe not so successful bulimic. I'm not saying anorexia is a success strategy. This is part of what Jennette is talking about. So I think the reason that you should read it is I think it's going to make anyone really stop and think about their belief, their behaviors, how so much of who we are might be the product of somebody else's writing, might be the product of somebody else's story. So I think a lot of people are going to read this and resonate very, very deeply. And unlike some abuse stories, I don't want to say this has a happy ending. That's not really what it's about. But this is an ending of somebody coming out fully into their truth. And, maybe that's a reason we don't have too many memoirs like this. Certainly not a celebrity memoir. So I can't think of that many other books that I've read that are by a famous person about their life where, we can think of famous examples like Mommy Dearest, where people are sharing stories of parental abuse. But I think just the power of this book is how Jennette finds her way out and what she is willing to do to create a life that she actually loves, that she actually cares about, and really just discovering her own thoughts and agendas. So I think this is an incredible book that I'm excited to read again, and I think you might enjoy it too. And if you're a person who does kind of enjoy all those different levels of what's going on in pop culture, and then the transformation of any person, reading about anyone's transformation is part of the way we can do something with our own. So that is the book, I'm Glad My Mom Died, by Jennette McCurdy, and why I think you might want to pick up a copy. If any of you have read this book, I'm sure some of you have, I'd love to hear what you liked, what you didn't like. What was your experience reading this? I have some parental abuse in my background, perhaps not as serious as this, but there are elements of this that read for me in a very visceral way. So I'd be interested to see how that is for some of you. So again, I'm Ellen Melko Moore, hey YouTube, and this is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy.